Now I'm playing The Last of the Mohicans because I like the melody. It's no copyright. And it's just reminds me we live in David Thompson country. And it's beautiful. We're close to the mountains, very remote. And I just always think with The Last of the Mohican reminds me of how tough those explorers were back in those days when they came and explored this beautiful country of ours. And it's not like they could go to the fridge or the cupboard for a snack. So these guys were tough hombres, and it reminds me of that. And I'm also showing the footage of some of our Yukon trips when we were up in the Yukon, so you have something to watch while I'm narrating the story, because I'm not a selfie type of guy, and at least you got something to watch. And I want to tell you the story about when I was guiding up in the Birch Mountains in northern Alberta. Now, the Birch Mountains are more or less just huge hills, but the birch trees are massive. You can't put your arms around them. And the canopy they provide, it's like a park underneath them. And it's just beautiful. And I'd set up the wall tent and set up the camp and cut wood and got all ready. And the first plane came in, and it was a couple of Swedish fellas. And they couldn't speak Swedish, and I couldn't speak English, and they can't hunt the first day. So we had something to eat and went to bed early, and that night it started to snow. Now, that country can really snow. Now, it's a September 20th, but it started to snow, and by morning there was 1.5 feet of snow. So we jumped in the boat. I had a boat with a 9.9 little aluminum 14, and we went out and we called the moose in. Now, the moose you're looking at here isn't the moose we called in, but it just shows you how they'll come right in. And the bull was about a 50-inch, beautiful bull, 10 by 10, and he wanted it. He was shooting a .338 Norma Magnum, and he decided to harvest it, and he dropped it right on shore. One shot, smoked it dead. Now, if you don't clean a moose or an animal, they float. So we just tied his horns to the back of the boat and went back to camp. And because he had a bear tag, we processed the moose and used the carcass and the gut pile for a bait pile. And we set it up on shore about 60 yards from camp with a really good view. And now we had a bear bait because he had a tag. And the next morning we went out with the other hunter. That particular day we didn't see anything big. He was after a big one. And we went out, and nothing big came out. One maybe about the size of the one that the first hunter shot, but nothing really, really big. And he said he wanted a big one, and sign language, of course. Anyway, so then we went out the next day and went to the far end of the lake, and I called this moose Mr. Majestic. He was, I would say, between 55 and 60 inch. But he had points everywhere, and the points were long. They were, 8-10 inches long, and he had no short points. All his points, his daggers, they were huge. Some of them were probably, I'm thinking, 8-10 inches, maybe even possibly a foot long. Just huge, but he was narrow, and he wanted a really wide one, and he hemmed and hawed, and the other hunters poking him and saying, shoot, 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 but he didn't want it. So that's fine. I mean, we still had 6 days left to hunt. And so we went back to shore. But this is when the adventure started. Because when we got closer to shore and we looked at the bait pile, there was a huge black bear covering it up. He saw us coming from the water, and he was straddled over that bait pile like, that's mine, don't come any closer. Well, in Alberta, you can discharge a firearm from a boat as long as the boat isn't moving. And so we let it stop, and it was really calm that evening. And he's shooting that .338 Magnum. And he nails this thing, knocked it right off the bait pile, and it took off on a dead run. And now the excitement starts. So we went to camp and had something to eat, gave it a couple hours, and we start tracking this thing. And I mean, he was so easy to track. We still have about 1.5 feet of snow. He's hobbling, there's blood, he's hit. We expect to come upon him any minute. Well, we didn't. we started going, and it started to get dark, and so we turned around and we went back and we left him overnight. The next morning we went, had something to eat, and then got on his track again, and he was still moving. And so he took us into this really, really thick spruce swamp. Now this swamp, there's 1.5 feet of snow, and it's not frozen underneath. It's tough sledding. But we go around and we're following him, very easy to follow, still bleeding. And all of a sudden, we come on our own tracks. He'd made a complete circle and he was following us. Well, I wear 13 size Sorel winter boots. They're a big footprint. Well, his footprints were the same size as my footprints. So we made an executive decision and we ran back to camp. No, but we did hustle. We got back to camp and we said, well, he's definitely going to live. It's 2 days. So anyway, the rest of the hunt was uneventful simply because we never brought anything big enough for the one hunter. We brought some beautiful in. We saw Mr. Majestic at least 4 times. He came right across the lake to the calls. He was a beautiful animal, and I thought he would take him on the last day, but he wanted a bigger one, and he left without a moose, so they had just the one moose that the one fella harvested. But on the last day, we were waiting for the plane. He said, you know, do you mind going up and seeing if that bear is still alive? And so they sat at the camp and waited for the plane. And I went up, and sure enough, it wasn't probably 50, maybe 100 yards after he started tracking us. He literally had just got off into the spruce and bed down. And when I walked up, he took off on a dead run. I couldn't get a shot away, and he was gone. So I went back and told the Swedes what I just told you, and said, no, he's still alive. And so he said, you know, he was good with that. And off they took. And in come a couple of Americans. And these guys were really good guys, and it was a pleasure being able to talk, because I like talking, and so we had really good visit. And they were from New Jersey, just great guys. And almost verbatim with the hunt with the Swedish, because we took off with the boat, we went across. I wanted him to shoot Mr. Majestic, but another moose came in, which was probably, I think he was 50-some too. He was not a small moose, a beautiful 10 by 10, and he decided he wanted it. So boat was really calm, and he just steadied it up and harvested that moose. Same thing, knocked him flat. Same thing, we hauled him back to camp. And the other hunter had a bear tag, so we just processed them and added to the bait pile and kept hunting. We never seen anything for about 2 days. It just shut down. The weather turned really, really warm. All the snow melted out. It was beautiful. I mean, we're camping with a gun. The moose turned right off, and so we just waited. But boy, did we get a surprise. The one night, all of a sudden, all 3 of us were woke up by this most mournful sound you have ever heard. Here the wounded bear had came back, and he was visiting the bait pile. Now Harold had a bear tag, but that bear was smart. He wouldn't come out during the day, and all night he would howl and growl, and it was just eerie. You know, when you're camped like that, way up in the north, and you got a bear that size, that close to camp, and it was just unnerving. And so for 4 days, we would take off with the boat. There was just nothing happening. We did some fishing. Just everything turned off except that darn big bear. Anyway, we got lucky. On about the 7th day, or maybe even the 8th day, he was on the bait pile when we came back from one of our day trips. And Harold made a beautiful shot and harvested him. And when we skinned that bear out, his whole shoulder was completely mashed from when the Swedish hunter had hit him. And what tough animals. He had survived now a total of almost 14 days, hobbling around in the bush, scaring the pants out of us. And he turned out he was almost 10 foot long when we skinned him. Unbelievable. We never did score the skull, but just a beautiful animal. So my American friends went home with a beautiful moose and a beautiful big bear, and it was quite the hunt. Thanks for watching. Please donate to cancer, and we'll see you in the next video.